That brings us to item number 20, which is a discussion agenda, proposed revisions to board policy, CBI, evaluation of the superintendent. And I will just tell the board that in our discussions related to our superintendent's plan for this coming June the 30th, we've been looking at policies, and the next two are in this category we felt like we needed to take a look at with our legal counsel to more streamline in a manner that will help us going forward. So with that, do we have any discussion about these policies shown in Exhibit I?
Mr. Gant?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Hammond.
Mine is not a specific question as much as, like, we are on the CBI one, right? The first one, right?
Yes.
Okay. There's like 2 paragraphs that we're just scratching out. Did we think it was just cumbersome? I mean, I'm trying to see why we think we should change it.
Well, when we asked legal counsel to look at our policies and the whole series of them, I want to give Mr. Cates credit. He brought
Yes.
a lot of this to our attention. We had our legal counsel to look at it, but in their opinion, a lot of what you see that's been stricken through is specifically spelled out in the superintendent's contract. So we wanted to eliminate things that might be in conflict with the contract. And that pretty much is what you're seeing there. So we have a very specific contract that we evaluate the superintendent on, and this at times could have been in conflict to that. Any other discussion? Ms. Hutchison.
Mr. Gant, I'd like to make a motion at this point.
Okay.
I move that the board move item number 20 to the action agenda for first reading approval.
We have a motion to move item 20 to the action agenda so we can take action. Is there a second to that? Ms. Baumgartner seconds. Is there any other discussion? Ms. Hutchison.
I'll just say that I think that, it's pretty straightforward, and we've had a chance to look at it. I don't see any reason for us to stretch it out. And, if the board votes for this motion, I think that would be a good move.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Ms. Hammond?
I have a question. I was talking about the 2 other paragraphs, but tell me, why do we strike out to establish the basic structure for board evaluation and superintendent that ensures board accountability to the community? Was that just, because I don't see another place below that. It doesn't seem like it gives you anything like that, because a lot of times so we're just cutting that out.
And again, I think the feeling from our legal consultant on that is that the contract for the superintendent establishes that basic structure.
So in other
Beyond
words, in the
basic
contract, it's a place to be accountable to the community.
Right, the contract itself spells that out. And probably what we ought to do at some point in the future is have at least part of that contract if you don't already have it, but it does spell it out very specifically, the accountability to the community and all the specific parts that have to be met.
Like, I don't have a problem about if it needs to be changed. I just think that it's important that the public be informed and,
Right.
That we're not rushing it through for some unknown
And I would
reason.
say, excuse me, I'm sorry. I would say in this case, this would be first reading approval. There will be a second and final. We can clear up any question that a board member might have and even have further discussion if you'd like, or anybody has a question along those lines, send it in. But it does, looking at where we are, we're meeting our last time in October. We'll meet once in November, once in December, and we're at the first of the year. So that's trying to get things lined up to have our policies in line with where we may be headed in the near future.
Do we get advice only from the lawyer, or do we get advice like from the School Boards Association as to what other districts have for this?
This advice came from a lawyer that works for the district, and the School Board Association usually has sample policies. This person also looked at the policies of our surrounding districts, found that most of them were outdated. If you can notice on here, the last time this was updated was in November 2006. Thank you again, Mr. Cates, for that, for helping us with that. But What our attorney let us know is that a lot of our surrounding districts and a lot of districts in the state have outdated policies here that possibly could be in conflict with their own contracts. I mean, this one possibly could be with ours. So we're trying to clean up some things going forward, pretty much we do with a lot of policies. And again, I'll reminder, this is first reading, so any question that comes up. Mr. Cates.
I think the strikeout in the first sentence makes sense to me because the policy title is its purpose, evaluation of the superintendent. I think there are other places that address the issue that our accountability to the community is pretty clear throughout all of our policies. And then the second paragraphs, I appreciate, at first I was struggling with the amount of strike through, but I also realize we often get policy and procedure confused, and we encumber our policies with a lot of process or procedure. So I appreciate that we are kind of sticking to our policy is we evaluate the superintendent. It'll be based on our contract with the superintendent, and that process can be spelled out in our procedures or other documents and doesn't need to be in the policy. So I appreciate the effort that was done here.
Great comment. Any other comments on that? So we've had a motion to move this item number 20, from discussion to action. That was your motion, right?
Yeah, for first reading.
For first reading. And would your motion, did it include language for approval or not? Just to move it and then have a second motion to approve?
Right.
All right, so this is just to move it to action. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. That passes unanimously. Now, Ms. Hutchins, if you'd make a second motion.
Certainly. I move that we approve the proposed revisions to Board Policy CBI, evaluation of superintendent as shown in Exhibit I.
Motion to approve. Ms. Baumgartner seconds. Now, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. That brings us to item number 21, which is under the discussion agenda, which is proposed revisions of Board Policy CBA qualifications of the superintendent, shown in Exhibit J. And just to give you a little history, this same policy was reviewed by our legal counsel, and these changes that you see were suggested to get it more in line with where we should be. And last revised in November of 2006. Having discussion? Ms. Hammond.
Personally, and I know it's just an opinion, but I do like what they changed that struck out. I guess it's the third paragraph, because I think it might have put some qualifications that are spelled out that might, negate somebody with qualifications for being a great superintendent. I think the one that says with 2 or 3 years in administration at the district level, and that's been struck out, but it just says relevant qualifications and experience as determined by the board. And I personally think that was broader and helps us not overlook somebody that might not have that specific qualification. So I liked that one.
Good point, good point. Any other discussion? Ms. Hutchison?
Mr. Gann, I'd like to make a motion at this point.
Yes, ma'am.
I move that we move item number 21 to the action agenda for first reading.
Have a motion to move this item to the action agenda. We have a second. Mr. Halterwanger seconds. Any further discussion?
Mr. Ganton.
Yes, sir. Mr. Cates.
The only question I have, and I believe counsel's still here, but the last sentence says additionally, persons considered for this position should have maintained active membership and participated in. My only kind of quibble with that is that's a little bit, I don't know what that means for them. I understand what it means to have active membership, but I'm not sure what it means for them to participate in. Is that attend meetings? Is that to present? I would almost rather us strike the ambiguity or clear it up, one or the other. But that the first part of that makes sense. I understand, even I understand what active membership means, but I'm not sure the second half of that to me, is a little ambiguous.
That's a good point. I think you'll see similar language in the superintendent's contract. It talks about participation in local, state, and national, but we can certainly get some definition on that before we would have second reading. Ms. Hutchinson?
I was just going to say that if we're looking for hiring a new superintendent, that would be a new contract, so.
Right.
But I happen to agree with what Mr. Cates said. I think that it might be getting into a little bit too much detail for a policy, but it certainly could be something that's written in a, when the board looks at qualifications, desired qualifications, that could be included at that point. But I don't know that it's really should be part of the policy, that whole last line. My suggestion would be to strike that whole last line.
Fine.
I don't know what other people think.
So go ahead. Mr. White?
No, I would concur with Ms. Hutchison, is that we've got the insert above and other relevant qualifications, experiences determined by the board. That gives us the flexibility to decide what credentials somebody needs at any given time. And I think the danger of that last sentence is, I think Mr. Cates correctly articulated, it's ambiguous, but then it becomes, are you going to be looking at who's got the most memberships in something? And does that have any real relevance to what we're looking for? I'd strike the whole thing. I think the insert above and other relevant qualifications and experience gives us the flexibility we need to make a decision based on the credentials of people that are before us.
Ms. Hammond?
I would like to agree with that also. I think I'm like Mr. White, this covers it for us.
Ms. Hutchinson, you could alter your motion and suggest that change, just taking that whole last
Well,
bit.
the motion on the floor is moving it. I don't think.
Moving it, okay.
Yeah, I don't think
It's
we.
a little confusing in the process.
I know, yeah, probably the decision.
Let's talk about moving it, and then we'll
Yes.
talk about striking it.
Right, so. on the
Anything else
floor.
on moving it? I think I know where we're headed on next bit. All right, all those in favor, please raise your hand. That passes unanimously, and that puts us in the action agenda. Now, Ms. Hutchinson, or Mr. Cates. Mr. Cates.
Is it okay to ask questions concerning the policy, or we're still there?
We're still there,
Make a motion.
and we don't have a motion on it, though. We just moved it.
Okay. I move that we give first reading approval to policy CBA with the deletion of the last sentence in the fourth paragraph.
Okay, we have a second. Baumgartner seconds. Now we have discussion. Mr. Cates.
Well, the question I had was, I don't know that striking that entire sentence, I believe just striking "and participated" would have satisfied my concern, because I think active membership in professional organizations might be important, and I don't know if it's fair to put Dr. Hefner on the spot, but I will. Beg forgiveness later. Do you see that as important for us to document here, that someone that is seeking to be a superintendent is an active member, meaning they're a member in professional organizations regardless of the participation question?
I certainly agree that the participation is not appropriate to be here, because if you're looking at maybe somebody who's a first-time superintendent, they may not have had opportunity, they may have had a membership but not had an opportunity to participate or had the means to participate. But I'm also fine with striking the entire thing, because I like the phrase "and other relevant qualifications and experiences determined by the board." I think the board should have the flexibility to do as it chooses there. And then I think the board can specify you do specify, currently you communicate your expectation that your superintendent be involved in professional organizations by the contract, through the contract, because you pay for the superintendent's membership in those organizations. So I think it's covered there.
Mr. White?
And I would echo that. I mean, I think, for the sake of being redundant, even though you're active membership, then it gets to be, okay, which memberships are better than other memberships? And we see somebody's resume, we can evaluate that resume and discuss what they're doing and what that means. I think that's much more flexible and much more meaningful. I think it'll be that way for future boards, too. I don't want to lock another board into, well, so-and-so's got this, but that's not as good as this, and then you're in minutia that doesn't matter.
Any other comments? Ms. Hutchinson, sorry.
Mr. Gant, or the board, the first sentence in that first paragraph, I don't really have I'd like the administration to take a look at it, or perhaps we do. It seems confusing. I keep reading it because I see that it says, well, have earned at least a master's degree, comma, education specialist degree, and then it says preferably a doctorate. It seems like we could clean up that language a little bit better to make it more clear. And I think, where we say preferably a doctorate, I don't know, maybe we need to put this in bullet form. I just read it and realized that I don't have a solution, but I think it's somewhat confusing. Mr. White might have a solution.
Yeah, I was going to suggest it looks like because it's set off with commas, it gets confused as a series.
Mm-hmm.
So just put it in parentheses and take the first comma out. So it's a parentheses that modifies the words right before it, education and specialist degree.
Well, but that's
That's the way I read it.
Well, see, that's the problem. That I didn't read it like that. I read it as they should have at least a master's degree, then comma, I'm reading, or an education specialist degree. And I'm not familiar with these degrees. And then it's like, but would prefer a doctorate. It's just confusing, and I don't have right off the top of my head, unless some great wordsmiths around here could whip out something really quickly.
And we probably, our legal counsel's probably going to look at this again, too. We could request that they help us make that clearer. That's the problem. All those criteria, okay, we just need to be a clear path there.
Right.
Why don't we leave it where it is?
And the question I have, because I read this different than you, which means there is something wrong with the language, because I read it to be just the specialist degree is preferably the doctorate, but are they really saying a doctorate is preferable over everything, or is it, I don't know the answer to that. Dr. Hefner, do you have I guess the doctorate, maybe you're biased.
I certainly
You gotta get
prefer
it.
the doctorate.
You what?
I think for a district like ours, you would
too.
clearly
For a
expect
doctorate.
your superintendent to have an earned doctorate.
I like the word earned.
Earned doctorate in educational administration.
As opposed to
An honorary one that you bought.
You can buy them. And Mr. Gant,
Internet.
Ms. Hammond?
where it says, and really I agree with what everyone said, and then the criteria for alternate route certification, I wasn't sure even what that is. It's kind of, to me, a catch-all. I'm sure, like Dr. Hefner could tell me alternate routes of certification. I don't know if that means like a teacher can go and get their practice. There are different ways, but how about with administrative area?
I'm not the authority on how to do it because I went the traditional way, but there are other certifications out there through like the Broad Foundation where certain certifications are given. Again, to me, your key phrase there is it's whatever the board determines to be appropriate. That's the most essential phrase. However, my own personal bias is that, and if you look at the superintendents across the state and you look at the superintendents in the Midlands, I believe you're going to find that all of them have earned doctorates.
Ms. Hutchinson, I think we have a solution.
The other thing that I don't like about this sentence is the phrase, "in the area of educational administration." I'm wondering if that isn't tying us, that might be tying our hands. I don't know that there might be some other ways, there might be some other terms in other universities. It just seems to be too specific for a policy. It might be something that the board crafts as part of the search, that, that's a desired degree. But I believe it's a little bit too, my thought is it's too specific for a policy.
Mr. Cates.
And I think we're going to need our legal counsel to help us with this whole paragraph and maybe come back, but because I believe that specificity's there, educational administration, because you're going to need that in order to meet the last sentence in this paragraph, the requirements set forth by the South Carolina State Board of Education to have the superintendent certification. So that whole paragraph probably needs to be rewritten in light of the current law and requirements to hold that South Carolina State Board of Education certificate as administrator. So I would think, instead of us keep rewriting that paragraph, to simply ask for our attorneys to help us with that, and we can look at that in the next reading. Is that?
That's very appropriate.
I think he just said it. Why don't we get the attorney to clean it up for us?
And just remember, it is first reading, so second reading, we could have it all polished out. We're going to get close with it, but I think that's the best suggestion I've heard. We'll just have it reviewed, and then we'll work on that if it doesn't get exactly. Does everybody live with that?
Yeah.
Mr. White?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we got to go ahead and vote on the first reading and come back and modify it in the second reading. I think we got to give some directions to the attorney. I mean, I think what you're saying is you want to make sure that the first sentence and the second sentence are supportive of whatever legal standards are there, and then but that doesn't necessarily mean the lawyer directs the standard. He just makes sure they fit with the standard. But I think what we heard from Dr. Hefner is that maybe preference should be for an earned doctorate. Maybe that's the way we direct our counsel to rewrite this with clarity, but it also makes sure it comports with the legal standards. But the preference is for the earned doctorate. The question is whether educational administration is a condition of the legal standard. But again, I think flexibility ought to be the key.
It almost seems to me you'd start with, they must meet the minimum licensing and certification requirements to have a superintendent certificate. And then in addition to that, you would specify preference for an earned doctorate.
I think we're all in agreement saying the same thing. We want to go forward with first reading, but we're going to ask legal counsel to clean it up for us for further review before second reading. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion about any part of this other than that first paragraph? Seeing none, all those in favor of giving first reading approval, please raise your hand. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson. That brings us to item number 22, which is to adjourn for the evening, and I would entertain a motion. Ms. Baumgartner.
I move that we adjourn.
Second, Mr. White. Mr. White, seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Passes unanimously. Thank you all.